Finance and Property Committee to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance. All rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Supervisor Marshall has contacted me and indicated she cannot attend today's meeting. We're waiting for Supervisor Zhang to join us. Does anybody wish to make a public comment? Nobody contacted me or the clerk. Therefore, we will move on to the approval of the November 9th minutes, which were in the packet. What are your wishes? Moved by Lemmer, seconded by Leahy to approve. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the minutes will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. We'll jump down to item 6A, 6B, we're going to take up first because of time commitments, in spite of people being directionally challenged. We're not going to let that one go. Streets versus avenues in Wausau.
I will never forget now.
East side, west side. So.
I'm never, I don't know what you're talking about.
I could make a comment, but I won't.
Now we know clearly how to ensure that the chair has read the packet.
Mission accomplished.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Human Resource Finance Committee meeting. There we go, now it is, the green light's on. Thank you for having us here today. So I'm Jamie Polly, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry for the City of Wausau and Marathon County. We are here to present to you today the update to the Marathon County West Side Master Plan, which has been about a year in the making. For this, we had done a study back in 2007, I believe was our last one, and we are updating it now to move forward with ways that we could make the park, Marathon Park, a little bit more user-friendly, kind of the layout of it, how we can utilize those facilities better, some of the aspects of UW Stevens Point at Wausau campus, as well as West Street with the, this had gone to the Infrastructure Committee last year for direction on whether or not we should do this plan with the idea that Highway Department is staying in its current location or if it would be moving. They gave us the direction at that time to work on this update with the assumption that the Highway Department and the Parks Department would be moving off of West and Party Street and that we should look at this county-owned property and how we're going to redevelop it. So with me today is Jason Valeris. He is the consultant for MSA Consulting that we had hired to help us update the West Side Master Plan. He's going to walk you through our plan and our process, kind of where we are today. This is still a draft. We're getting comments from you today, and then we do hope to take this to County Board for final adoption in December. But I will turn it over to Jason for that kind of walkthrough of how we're to where we are today. And then you can just scroll.
Yeah.
This.
All right. Thank you. So,
You want to stay up?
and then you can just jump in as you have comments to add. So, what I'm going to do, we've included the full current draft of the plan document in the packet, but I'm going to go to the map here and zoom in on a few things to kind of give you a tour of the plan, and we can work from that to talk in more detail about any of them. So I'm going to give you a quick tour of the intended changes and then open it up for feedback and discussion. We also have some cost estimates and some phasing ideas about how all of this could work. So one of the big kind of park-wide changes that are envisioned, as you are familiar with the park right now, one of the features that we heard a lot about in the process, and that process included a community survey, a meeting at Eastgate Hall, some interviews with various folks in the community, including county staff, city staff, and various interest groups that use the park, is the the central area that is all gravel. So the gravel parking area is something that jumps out to people as distinctive and unappealing. And so we've proposed some changes to the roadways throughout the park to narrow them in places to make it to kind of calm traffic that's coming through, and to eliminate that gravel. And so the roadways would be curbed, and the parking would be curbed and defined and paved as compared to the current gravel. A fairly significant change in terms of the circulation system. I don't know how visible on your screens the mouse is. Is the mouse visible for you guys? There is a pathway through, a roadway through the northeast quadrant of the park right now. And there's some parking, perpendicular parking mostly along there, and we've proposed that would be removed. It's not really essential to navigation of the park. The parking in there, to comment on how parking gets used in the park, one of the major users of parking in the park is university students. And part of the reason for that is the pricing structure for the university, because they charge to park on their sites on their campus, and they don't charge because they don't control the use of the parking that's in the park. And so naturally, students park in the park and not on campus. And so one of the proposals of this plan is to say, come up with a parking permit system, and this is going to require a little bit of work with the county to administer, but whether you're parking in the park or parking on campus, if you're there as a student or there for campus use, that you're paying the same amount for that purpose. So that kind of addresses some of the parking demand. The parking lot that is nearest campus here, that's the first and primary parking location for students, and that continues to be there. It's shown slightly changed here, but this is essentially what is there right now. So we propose removing the rest of that roadway, removing a shelter that is otherwise inaccessible if you take out the roadway here along the north side of the park. Also in this northeast quadrant, the railroad is still there, but with the removal of that roadway, it has more space that it could be expanded. So it is a very popular feature. We heard from a lot of people that they enjoy that from their own childhoods and for their kids, but it's pretty simplistic. It's a little loop, and so proposal to expand that, to use more of that area. I'd say one of the key features of the plan here then is the proposed replacement of Marathon Junction. And with that, the replacement of the splash pad, which is at the end of its life and needs to be replaced no matter what. This plan would take the splash pad out from inside the railroad and kind of resolve that crossing the railroad condition that exists right now, and so move it to the north of the new Marathon Junction. That would result in the removal of the bathrooms that are there right now. So those would get pulled in to this new structure. And then we would also propose a new playground. There is playground investment already scheduled for the park, and this is suggesting, hey, bring that over here, make this a multi-use, multi-age type of facility. Along the theme of multiple ages, we're proposing that there could be a beer garden use, that this building is occasionally used for, that kind of complements and works with the big kitchen shelter just to the northeast of that. And then finally, number 9 here, directly east of Marathon Junction, is a proposed skating ribbon. And that could be a year-round, both summer and winter. A skating ribbon, if you've not seen it, is a chilled, can be chilled, but a ribbon of ice that you can skate on. So as opposed to a traditional rink, it's just a ribbon. It can actually undulate, which is a new experience for ice skating. So a host of uses there around a new Marathon Junction is proposed. As we move then to the northwest quadrant of the park, we get into more of the wooded area, and we have the campground. We kind of debated in this process and sought feedback, like, is the campground something that should continue in Marathon Park? Is it valued by the community? Is it more hassle than it's worth? The county kind of struggles at times about who's camping there and whether they're paying their fees, and is it really complementing well the rest of the uses in the park? The end conclusion of all of that discussion was, all right, let's not expand it or shrink it or remove it. We're going to maintain it as it is. It is valued by people who use it. It is valued by the fair. The fair uses it during fair operations as a place for people, especially who have animals on site during the fair, as a place that they can stay on site. And that speaks also then to one of the things that was important throughout this process, is to make sure that this park continues to serve the needs of the fair. The land was provided by the fair under the condition that it continue to be used for the fair. And so as we were talking about various changes, we were sensitive to the fact that we need to make sure we're accommodating the successful continuing function of the fair. And so we'll get to that quadrant last. The southwest quadrant, again in the wooded area. We're still showing the roadway through there, but we're calling it we're calling it a service road in there, with the intent that it is no longer, except for occasionally, for example, during the fair, it is no longer accessible for people to drive through on a typical day or week. Instead, it is for getting access to doing tree maintenance, and it can be used as a walking path. The constellation of arrows in here is a suggested option of a disc golf course. That would require some further, more detailed planning to figure out exactly how that would work, and probably some selective tree trimming to make that work. Not a lot of tree removal. We do emphasize and want to continue to emphasize that the fair is important and the trees are important. When you ask people what do they think about this park, even if they're not users of the park, they really recognize in the trees, the white pines, that stands out as something that's really distinctive and valued by the community. And so that's something that we've reinforced through the plan, that the stand of trees on the west and throughout the park is something to be maintained. Another feature that's proposed here on the west end is that in those trees, the wooded area, you could create a high ropes course, which would be like a series of like telephone pole type poles put in the ground, and that could be something that is, for example, operated by another entity. It wouldn't have to be the county. It could be, for example, a tech school. We've seen that format where it becomes sort of a training and team building type of facility. So an option. And so then finally getting to the southeast quadrant and talking about the fair. And again, we're focusing on the park at the moment, and then we'll get to the other areas. So the fair operation area is, in terms of buildings, the exhibition building, the kind of central iconic building, would not change much. It's serving the functions that it needs to serve for the fair, and we didn't see a whole lot of opportunity to try to retrofit that for year-round use, and so we are not proposing that. Eastgate Hall is, I think, a bright spot in terms of multi-use performance, and also generating some revenue for the county, and we see it as an opportunity to make some strategic improvements that would further enhance that, to make it more, even more inviting for events such as weddings and other things where the acoustics and the summertime comfort would matter. So some opportunities to further enhance that as really a year-round multi-purpose facility. The animal barns wouldn't change. We aren't proposing any changes to those. The grandstand wouldn't change. That's been fairly recently improved and is in good shape. The multi-purpose buildings, that is the toughest nut to crack, I'd say, in terms of what do you do with that. So those buildings and the ice equipment within them are kind of in rough shape. That ice equipment was used when you got it decades ago, and is tough to maintain. The building, it doesn't have insulation, and would be better able to be used for ice kind of into the shoulder seasons, which the ice users have been asking for if it were insulated. It's not. It's got some issues. No, I don't want to restart the computer right now. I'm going to postpone that for 8 hours. All right. What this plan proposes is that rather than try to pump money into that existing facility to make it continue to function, we have some thoughts on what you would do to improve and maintain the function of that, but if necessary, but really the preference is don't continue to spend money on that. Begin planning now for a new facility. And in theory, that facility could be here on this site, though that is awkward in terms of the size, because if you're going to build new, you're going to build larger than you have. You need more ancillary space around the two ice sheets than you have right now. To be functional, it's a little too tight right now. And then the parking demand, especially as you're committing to having parking be more defined and paved, starts to encroach, I think, more into the park. And so the recommendation is don't try to rebuild an ice facility here. Look for another site other than here. And so we're showing a building here because you do need those buildings for the operations of the fair and some other it's used for other events at times through the year. It's a good location for that, and so what you're seeing here is a slightly reduced size that is kind of a generic new facility here. Eventually, the existing facility can function for a while if it's not needed for ice, but eventually a new purpose-built facility would make the most sense. The horse barn is showing here next to that. The long-term plan to that, to move it further from the tracks and rotate it up next to the multi-purpose building, which both get the horses further from the railroad tracks, which is desirable, and improve circulation because you can get around that and along the tracks. So during fair operations, when you've got, especially when you've got trucks and trailers coming through and needing to navigate, that helps that quite a bit. So that's the park. And if we then get to the south side of the track, so some of these other sites, just to give you a quick tour, number 32 here, that's where the Parks Department operations are based right now. 38 is the Wausau Iron Works site. This one's kind of ghosted out, so we're showing some possible uses if this were to be adapted for use as a kind of an extension of the park. So some recreation uses. You could do something with that existing old brick warehouse along West Street, but it's ghosted out because the county doesn't control it, and we don't want to depend upon the use of that site for these plans. But there are some things that could be moved there. The remainder of the site then is under county control, so 31 and 30. What is all of 31? That's the cold storage site, and the county has owned that as of recently. And then 30, that is the highway department site. And the proposed use here is that this is where hockey would move to. And it would be, and I should say more than hockey, the ice sheet use, and it would be more than just ice. So we're talking about a couple sheets of ice, but also space for like an indoor soccer type facility. So a multi-sport indoor facility. Complemented by some outdoor field space to the east on the cold storage site. 29 here at the west edge of the building is a proposed commercial use, so taking advantage of the 17th Avenue exposure there. One of the things I want to point out is that the court sports have been moved to this site south of the tracks. The pickleball users are very tenacious advocates for their sport, and we've been hearing from them and doing work in other communities. We hear from them in other communities too. They are a very prominent user group right now. We had a recent draft still had that in the park, and we tried to keep it, show how the rest of the site functions with that use still in the park. that was really tough, and the Fair Board in particular was unhappy with kind of the logistical layout of the fair as we were moving stuff around, and in particular as we took the midway and we took it out of where the gravel area is right now, which is kind of right in the heart of the park, and we had pushed it down to this field south of the grandstand, and their feeling was that was spreading out the fair operation too much, and they asked that, and that further that they needed that area south of the grandstand for parking in various ways, whether that be for patrons or when they have special events in the grandstand, they put truck parking there. So the long-term plan either way had been to get the court sports out of the center of the park, and we've kind of accelerated. We're just showing, right now we're going to show that's coming out of the park. In terms of phasing, that's going to be one of the later things that happens, and we're committed to building new ones before the old ones go away. We want to be clear about that because we'll hear about it if we aren't. That is that's worth noting is kind of what happens with court sports. The last couple of things I want to point out here, so we're going to get to talk about the campus. The site that is currently the Parks Department facility is proposed for complete redevelopment and reuse as a residential use. On campus, not many changes shown or considered. The biggest one, the one that was asked of this process, is figure out what to do with Marathon Hall. And our evaluation as we continue to look at that building is that it doesn't deserve to continue to be there. It doesn't function for residential use. The only thing it really has some viability for, in theory, probably is an office use, that it could be adapted as office space if you try to open up some walls between some of the units. But even then, it's kind of subpar space, and you're having to make investments in the building just to get to that. And we would recommend instead just tear it down and use that site for housing. And that housing wouldn't be student housing per se. It could be targeted to be at least some of the units income qualified in a way that would make it affordable and could maybe help to serve the needs of some students, but it wouldn't be directly tied to the university in any way. Across the street from that is the open field on campus there, and we aren't showing anything yet because we're taking kind of a conservative look at the campus right now that honestly is a bit of a wait and see as to how the campus performs, how enrollment plays out over the next few years. It's been in flux lately, and rather than put it on a path now to redevelopment that would constrain the campus, we opted not to show that, though we've raised the possibility that, hey, this too could be residential infill here next to the campus, close to downtown. They are currently working, number 37 here, the main academic building, is just talking about some changes within the building to the kitchen and the cafeteria and an auditorium space, and that's something that the university is exploring right now. The last one to point out is number 34 at the top end. This is a parking lot right now. It's a parking lot that the university doesn't use at all. They don't have need for it. As enrollment has dropped, there hasn't been demand. No one really likes crossing that street. It's ripe for redevelopment. Housing is the natural use. We're suggesting townhomes. It could be less intensive than that. We're not proposing it be more intensive than that, such as multi-story, multifamily. But some sort of residential use is a natural fit there. I want to talk about the costs, but I think I should pause first and just hear some reactions and questions about the ideas in the plan.
Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Cody?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had one kind of question and concern about the parking. So I know that this idea of, I'm not against removing a parking lot. What I'm more concerned about is the fee structure, because I too was a student at this university when it was the MC, and I never paid for parking because I always parked at Marathon County. My concern with putting a fee structure in there is students are really good at dodging fees. So what they're probably going to end up doing is parking on the streets surrounding the school. And then that could create additional problems for the city. My other concern with that is if there's a fee structure, how does that interfere with free parking that residents would enjoy at the park as well? Like, how do you determine if they're a student versus if they're just a resident that's there at the park? And yeah, otherwise, I think this is a really good plan. I like the redevelopment into housing because I know that that's certainly a need within Wausau. Well, those are all the comments I had. Thank you.
I can respond to the parking questions there. I think and those are some valid questions as to how exactly that gets managed. The simplest thing that I think the university needs to do no matter what is to charge the same for the parking on campus as off. And so whether that is nothing or maybe a modest fee that isn't a big impact on students, having a different structure for the two it clearly doesn't make sense. It does, if students are paying to park, the attraction of just walking a little further west into the park is obvious, and that will require some monitoring. So there's a monitoring cost associated with that, some enforcement cost associated with that. If it would have the effect of pushing people out into the neighborhoods, I mean, there are, it's sort of an unintended consequences thing where you can kind of then move to the next step of, okay, how do we regulate parking in the neighborhoods? And this is a classic kind of town gown challenge, which is sometimes met by restricting daytime parking to a certain number of hours, which has an effect of making it not work very well for students. I don't know if it needs to go to that level, but that's something that's on the menu of options.
If I could add also to for our, I thought the light was on, sorry. If I could add, so I'm not sure if Jason said this at the beginning, but when this core group that started working on this master plan included myself. It did include Ann Herter-Rapp from the university, as well as the city's economic development director, and she also had a city planner there as well, and then our facilities and capital management staff was on that committee also to kind of shape this. And parking in general is going to be something that the university needs to discuss because they actually pay us, the county, a certain dollar amount to keep those lots plowed in the winter for the students that aren't paying for their parking across the street. So essentially they're paying, it's costing the university more money to allow them to pay or to park in the park as well. So that is something that even without this plan, I think they have come to realize it needs to be talked about.
Any other questions? Supervisor Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is perhaps tying more into the talk of financials, but more on the lines of projected revenue increases or changes. Talking about updating buildings and making them more modern. How, especially kind of the sports arena, the hockey facility areas, even some of those multi-purpose for larger events that would be paying more. Do we have, or will we have any sort of projected revenue numbers or even comparables to similar designs in other cities, other states?
Yes, and I can put those together. One of the things we look at, we don't have it in the plan, but specifically for Eastgate Hall, and I think that one of the parts of the plan is just to do some some updates to that building just to make it more attractive. Right now, we know what our revenue is from it. I can put a projection together that will, before we do any of these, final plans, we would do revenue and the return on investment for that. But just that alone, that building, we don't have that's the biggest county facility we have that could host a lot of big events. And if it had air conditioning and a little bit of acoustics, maybe a little bit different entrance to make it more of a wedding venue type feel or a warmer space, I think it would be used a tremendous amount. And so we can put numbers to that. As far as the ice arena goes, I do have experience with that at my previous job. I mean, that was Minnesota, so it's a little bit different because the rates are a little bit higher. And but I have also been working with our local high schools, our local youth association, our NH3L hockey team that we currently have in town, as well as our figure skating club and others that use the facility. I have a really good idea of what our revenue is now. It is our second highest revenue generating program, next to camping in our department. And that's only with having ice late September through March. We do have a demand for ice, at least on one sheet, year-round for the number of users that would use it with camps and other things. We do know that the ice rates would have to increase somewhat to a new facility. There's other options we could do with that new facility as far as a retail space, maybe a dryland facility or therapeutic office or something like that. So there is potential for a significant amount of revenue with the demand that we see now, but we would put that all together in that final plan and the final design. We'd have to see what the design will actually encounter, but I think there's a lot of potential to increase revenue when it comes to the ice arena as well.
I think prior to any action on this plan, you're going to need an operational budget as well as a capital side to make sure that we can look at what the cost will be, particularly in light of levy limits and other things. So there's a lot of work. One of the questions that I have as we look at this is we're in the process of redesigning the water system. Is this development reflected in that, and are you intending to build out with that, or lay the when you put the new water system in, have the possibility for expansion?
Yes, so we're waiting to hear a couple of the options that our consultant for the water system, Becker Hoppy, will come back with. They're still currently working on it, but they are aware of this plan to moving forward. But essentially, this plan doesn't change a lot of our water system. We're still keeping our bathrooms, other than the junction, which we're keeping in a similar location. Everything's pretty much staying where it is. It's just a matter of changing some of the roadways and adding more trees and grass. But we're not moving any facilities. We're not taking any restrooms away. So the way we're laying it out would be the uses of the park with the ability to expand. Now, we still have to determine when that plan comes back what our most cost-effective way of doing that is. We may replace the line as it is today, where it just ends within the park and has laterals out to our existing facilities, or whether we decide to loop that water system through the park. That will all depend on costs and what comes back to the county board once we see those. We haven't seen those yet, but there will be opportunity to add facility as well. Those facilities that are year-round, like Eastgate Hall and our ice arena now, are not going to be affected by this because they are already year-round looped waters there. It's really the junction and then the bathrooms all to the west, which, like I said, are staying in their current location. But we would build them out so that we build out the plans too of the road.
Then I know we're not into the budget yet, but I think that if this were presented to the county board right now, absent some outside funding, that the likelihood would be pretty remote that it would be implemented, just in light of other borrowing requirements. So do we have a plan relative to securing third-party contributions to this? And where does that fit in, and what buildings are affected by that?
Well, I think the direction from administration and the county board in the past was that we needed a plan in place first, which is what this is. So we're not asking to implement any particular part of the plan at this time, but we need a vision for the park. So if this is the vision that is selected, we would then, before we did any work on the park, prioritize what it is that should be done first. So in my mind, my recommendation would most likely be the lowest hanging fruit and revenue source is Eastgate Hall. I would think that would be maybe one of our first areas to look at. And like any capital improvement project, I would bring that forward to county board. With that would be if there's any outside funding, or if it's something that we're requesting solely of that process. But there will be, I don't think we can do any of this project or a majority of it without some public-private partnership, especially when it comes to the ice arena. If this is the location, I think Marathon County needs to just look at the ice arena and the fact that if we are going to continue operating one, we need a new one somewhere, whether it's part of this plan or it's in a different location. That's really yet to be determined. But the current ice arena is really day by day, year by year. If it goes down, we will not have one, and there'll be a lot of users that don't have a space for it. So that's something we have to take into account. And all of it, these are the pricing in the budget of this is all just estimates. It's all dependent upon what the actual final design of each of these areas is. The money we put in as far as the ice arena goes is for a really, really nice facility. When we get to actually designing it, it could be designed completely different, which the money and the budget would change. So what this is the concept plan. That's what we're asking County Board and your committee today, to see the vision of the park as it would be in the next 15 years. This is a 15-year plan. And if this is the vision that you can see for the park based on the research that we've done and the needs we have, then it's the plan that we work on going forward. And it would be, like I said, prioritizing of what would need to get done. I would think that would be the Park Commission would be a strong part in that to decide, is it the roadway infrastructure that we install first? Is it in my mind, like I said, it's Eastgate Hall, then it's maybe tackling the Junction Splash Pad Playground. That doesn't affect any of the rest of the park. You have to be strategic too, because until highway moves or we have the facilities on West Street, we don't have the option to move the ice arena if it's going to be in this location. So all of it's kind of contingent on other, the fair, the Midway can't be moved until the pickleball courts are moved, which the pickleball courts can't be moved until West Street's vacated. So, this is the concept, and that's what we're asking, and we know there's pricing, but it's also a 15-year concept that the pricing you see today in 15 years is not going to be that either. So, if we have a plan to work off of, then we can start prioritizing and bringing those projects back to the county board year after year with the return on investment, the actual cost, the effects on users, the public-private partnerships, which we'll seek, and stuff like that.
I'd ask that we try to be a little bit expeditious as we go through the dollars. We've got three other items that are a couple of other items that have to be acted on today. Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the plan, but as Jamie, you quite well alluded to, is certain things are contingent upon other things. And particular, the one that concerns me, obviously, and probably you as well, the most is our ice arena. And, what is the alternative that we have? Do we have any alternatives? Because, as you said, we're piecing it together year by year. And if, it goes down and we cannot repair, or we're not going to put multi-million dollars into repairing a system that potentially is going to move and then 2 years later move it. So what is the alternative? And then the other thing I think is critical is, I think, at least from my historic understanding, the revenue that's been generated helps offset some of the operational cost, but doesn't do anything for capital costs. So I think the critical to the whole operations is timing. Timing is everything, but I think it's really contingent on highway moving. But I think the biggest thing that's staring us smack in the face is the ice arena and the need for that to potentially have some kind of long-term solution. So do we have an alternative, I guess, if we don't have highway moving at this point?
Well, one alternative I see as a possibility is flip-flopping that court sport, I guess if we want to go back to that thing. This is just, I'm just throwing this out there, but the cold storage area that the county owns, as we know, the cold storage building has to come down. Whether the county likes it or not, it's got to come down. So that is, and then we do have emergency management there, which we do potentially have the option of putting emergency management even in the ice arena, because the ice arena could serve as a safe room for the community, which Phil and I have been working on. It's very in its infancy stages of what we could do for this community, but this could be a facility that could also be an emergency shelter. It's not ideal if we move it on just by location and access from 17th Avenue, but it could potentially be that if we needed to, we could build the ice sheet on the county-owned property next door to it and flip that plan. There is also, I've been talking to another group and a private developer that had an idea of a different location for the ice arena, potentially maybe down by Athletic Park. So it could go into a different location where it still could be a viable space. So I think we have a couple of options, but nothing as far as if it were going down tomorrow. I don't have a plan.
Totally understand.
Yeah, except for get everybody outside on ice that we'll quickly make as best we can. But
Just to follow up, and then if you could speak to what the projections show as far as the revenue, does it just offset operational costs and a capital drive with a public-private partnership would have to be done separately? And does the revenue generate anything towards capital?
yes, I think that's a great question. I think for the ice arena to get it done in this community, we would definitely need that public-private partnership. So somebody, a large investor, where we maybe look at naming rights of the facility and things like that, similar to what the Everest School District has done on their end. I think revenue could offset the debt depending on what that debt is and what the size of the facility is. I think that's going to be dependent on how we design it. I do think we can operate a facility like this to be revenue positive, whether it covers capital costs. If we have to pay for it all, probably not, but we would definitely want, I think that's something, even talking with my community partners and our other ice arena users, is we would have to have some sort of a private partnership with that. I think the county would still own and operate it and manage it, but we would work with somebody who would see a big investment in our community.
Well, I think it's critical, because if we're going to have one of the major users is the school system. There's other school systems that we are not providing, the county is not providing facilities for. So I think it's something that the taxpayer needs to look at.
Yes.
So if you want to quickly run us through the financials.
Sure. And to Jamie's point, the primary focus of this plan is the concept of what the park can be to enable more detailed project exploration and timing of things, and to kind of be able to tell people who have their own ideas about what the park can be, kind of yes or no, as it relates back to this plan. So I think the main purpose, I would say, of the projections at this point on a 15-year plan are just to get a sense of scale, and then to point out some of the timing, the sequencing intentions. So the grand total of everything that we've been talking about, and the focus of these costs is just the park and the sites south of the park is somewhere in that range of $50 to $70 million. A big chunk of that is the ice use, which we're kind of capturing as Area G, which is the ice plus the field and court sports down there. That by itself is 28 to 37 million by our estimate in total, and so that's a very large chunk of the overall cost that we're talking about. In terms of the timing of the the phasing of things and when costs hit. We've got a schedule here that tackles most of it within the next 10 years, and the biggest chunk between 25 and 27. I guess I would say that the sequence of when is a little more critical than the exact year in which it hits. But the hope would be that that timing, about 5 years from now, is enough to put all the pieces in motion to be able to build that new ice facility somewhere, to get that out of the park, and to allow some of these other pieces to fall into place after that. So we organize the costs, the capital cost estimates by these geographic areas, which is what these A through G represent. And so then each one is addressed in more detail. And you'll see that there are utility upgrade costs in each. So to the question and point about the water system, that there are components of that in most of the use areas. And so this is just how we assembled and then rolled up the various cost estimates. If you're looking at the plan yourself, I'm happy to respond to questions about any of it, but don't necessarily want to talk about any of it in more detail just as a matter of presentation, unless you were curious about something.
So we have, in essence, we are looking at a concept with lots of dependencies and challenges. I think one of the things that we'll need to do is as we look at how to deal with surplus property, we have the dorm, we have the property on the other side of Stewart Avenue and others that could affect components of this. We'll have to keep this in mind as we look at our property function is within this committee. But I think the issue before us today is whether to accept the plan. I think we're probably too early to approve it because there are lots of contingencies and plans going forward. So are there any questions? Or it is on the agenda as an actionable item, and it's been recommended to us by the Parks Commission and ERC?
No, ERC will see it next week, but Parks Commission,
Right.
we weren't going to take it through ERC because it's coming to HR Finance Committee, but we are going to take it to them for information next week
Okay.
also.
So are there questions or motions? Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to accept the plan and at some point have a presentation to the full board.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Leahy. Any discussion? If not, all is in favor of acceptance of the plan will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. The streets?
Yes.
All right.
We'll correct the streets. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Allison. Thank you. Now, we're going to sort of blend the claims disallowance process with item 6A1, claims disallowance. I'll turn it over to Mary Jo Malley to bring in your guest.
Oh, okay.
So good afternoon. Before we get started, I'd like to make a few brief introductions. I'm Mary Jo Malley. I'm the risk manager for Marathon County. Some of you I have probably not met yet, so I thought this would be a great time for an introduction. But the purpose of our presentation today is to provide some education on claims that are filed against the county and to give you a little background about my role and also the role of our insurance. So in risk management, one of my primary responsibilities is to administer the insurance for the county, which takes into account everything that Jamie was just talking about, the property at Marathon Park, to all the, insuring all the squad cars, the airport, the courthouse building, and so forth. But additionally, the county does occasionally get claims filed against the county, and claims can be anything from windshield cracks in citizens' windshields to slip, trips, and falls on county property to civil rights claims filed in the jail and so forth. So I don't believe we had this presentation for some time, so the focus of this presentation is going to be on Marathon County's relationship with Wisconsin Municipal Mutual Insurance Company, or WMIC as they're known, which is our liability insurer, and also on the claims themselves. What's the criteria for filing a claim against a government entity, as well as disallowing or denying it, and also you as the HR Finance Committee, what is your role in that process? So with that in mind, I am going to let our representatives from WMIC take over. We have with us today Palin Allen, who is the Executive Director of WMIC, and Jackie Call, who is a Senior Claims Representative, and they're going to provide the presentation from here.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time today. I know that Parks presentation was pretty good, but now we're doing insurance. So we're getting ready to rock your world, I know. No, but we do appreciate the time. And hopefully it is a little exciting because it is different and unique in that Marathon County is a member owner, and that makes a difference and changes the game a little bit. So I'm just going to go through, I think everybody got the handout. We weren't able to get up on the screen, so we'll just go through kind of old school here. Is that all right? If we... Okay, we tried. So just a really quick overview. We started in 1987, and the reason that matters is we came out of a hard market when yourself and a lot of other like entities either couldn't find insurance, or what you were able to find was extremely preventative as far as costs. And so the state set up a new ability for us to form and create insurance companies. We did that, and although you were not an original owner in 1987, you did join WMIC in 1995. So we've been together a long time, and thank you certainly for your membership. What do we consist of? We're 15 counties, 3 cities, and then 2 are called special districts. So those special districts are Lambeau Field and then American Family Field, where the Brewers play. They make up our special districts. The cities, I won't go through all of them because it's in the back here, but the cities are the city of Madison, the city of Eau Claire, and then La Crosse. Thank you, city of La Crosse. Drew a blank. Otherwise, it's counties across the state of Wisconsin. All members are owners. Again, why does that matter? Well, when you look at the way a mutual is set up, we don't answer to shareholders, we answer to you. We don't have to show a profit and loss, although we don't certainly want to lose money, but we don't have to show a profit and loss at the end of the year. We answer to you. And so our interests are your interests. It makes it, I guess, a little bit different in terms of how you operate, how do you run. If you can take in enough premium to cover everything as far as your exposures for the year, you get to the end of the year and you find that you've got some left over, it's back to you. That's the way that the mutual world is set up, and you being a part of that. So again, you have been a member since 1995. And what are some of the advantages of ownership? Well, I'm just going to touch on a couple of these fairly high level. Really, dividends, I mentioned those. We have a long history of giving dividends back to our members. Not to insult anybody's intelligence, but what is a dividend? Well, again, you get to the end of the year, you brought in more premium in the beginning than you needed. At the end, when you true everything up, you get the actuaries involved, and they say, we can give this money back because we don't need it for our operational expenses. Input on our governance, our strategy, our committees, work groups. We have committees, board members. We have a board of 7 that's made up, of course, of our membership. We have additional committees beyond that, and we take a lot of our guidance and a lot of our direction from those boards, those committees, and those groups, because it's your organization. I know when Jackie and I talk about WMIC, we look at ourselves as stewards of your resources. Our job is to provide you the best coverages that we possibly can at the most reasonable price, and that's pretty much the sum total of what we're trying to do. So good products at a good price with your governance and direction. Networking opportunities, we get together quarterly. We share a lot of ideas. We're all in it together. One of the things that's always impressed me in this particular world, government insurance, is the willingness to share. It's across the board, and I've kind of been in and around this for over 20 years now, and I don't think I've ever come across someone that said, no, we're not going to share. People are willing to give others what it is that they've worked on, and we do share a lot of the same challenges, whether it be counties, cities, what have you. We do share a lot of the same challenges, and so that sharing can go a long way in terms of helping you get your risk profile down, do things that you need to be doing from the safety and preventative side. Best practices are something that we share, and then there's the access to group purchases. It may not sound like a lot. We have 20 members. That may not sound like a whole lot. We have $55 million in assets. Our surplus is $37 million. You can see some of that on there. So we're a pretty good-sized player, and what that means is when we go into the marketplace, we leverage that size to either get access to products or pricing on products that you very likely wouldn't be able to do on your own. So again, we try to use our collective force in the market to get those products at prices that are advantageous to you. Interest of time, I don't know that I'm going to read through everything on here. I will say that when it comes to where really our primary focus is, we are primarily a liability company. So we provide the GL, that includes your auto liability, the public officials, air and emissions, those kinds of things. So primarily a GL company. We do some other, boutique coverages probably isn't quite the right word, but every now and then our members will come to us with a problem and we try to help find a solution. So we'll use brokers to access markets that maybe we don't have individually or in-house at WMIC, but we can go out and get you access to those. And then the other thing of interest is we are a 1/3 owner in MPIC. That's a property company. If you remember the State Property Fund, not too terribly long ago, kind of went belly up. Well, WMIC joined forces with actually two competitors, the League and CIVMIC, formed MPIC, the property company, and you're a 1/3 owner of that. So again, that shows up on our books as an asset, and we serve on the board and stay pretty plugged in. But a really good market solution that you would be quite unlikely to find in the private sector. And then the only other thing on there that I was going to make mention of is the fact that we do a work comp TPA and that we also provide an auto physical damage program through a broker. So again, it's access. We don't have it in-house. It's not in insurance terms on our paper, but we get access for you because as members you have tons of needs that are beyond just the general liability insurance. Services. So what do we do for our members? Why does it matter? First and foremost, I really want to point out that we have an extremely talented, and it's not just because she's standing behind me, we have sincerely an extremely talented liability claims department. I think at times I've believed that claims are just claims and claims handlers are just adjusters, and you can kind of plug them in and go. And first of all, the claims that we deal with, because of your high SIRs, which is your self-insured retention, these are very complex, difficult, challenging claims. And without individuals that are on it and have your personal best interest, someone like Jackie who's really investing in it, it really can get lost. So that's probably one of the first things. I should probably preface all this by saying I've been with WMIC now 5 months, so I've been doing an awful lot of learning as well, and that is probably one of the things that has really stood out to me is how incredibly talented our team is and the difference that makes in protecting your assets as a claims manager. You'll see some loss control resources. Again, I'm not going to point out all of these because I'd rather draw our attention to where we're going. I just mentioned I'm new, and we've got some plans and ideas that I think will be very exciting for our members. I know I'm excited about it, and our team is as well, so I want to get a chance to share that with you. But just continuing down the list, some of the other services that we provide. So we'll do coverage opinions. You can run into that pretty often where it can get confusing as to whether or not coverage even exists. And we can assist you in determining those coverage opinions. Certificate of insurance, again, those TPA services. The bottom line is you are a member owner. This is your company. And because of that, we will go through the extra, whatever is needed, to provide you the service that you need, and expect from us as your carrier, because we're in it together. Not going to spend a lot of time on financials, again, interest of time here, but I do think it's important to note that although we may be considered fairly small in terms of premiums earned, that 4.6 million that you see in 2021, our surplus is built over the years to about 35 million, and that is kind of your rainy day fund, is a way to think of the surplus. It's above and beyond what was needed in that given year. So I mentioned dividends. Certainly we do that, but we answer to regulatory bodies just like a lot of us do. And we have to keep a surplus that makes us financially stable, or we end up having our own issues within the marketplace. And so suffice it to say that surplus is extremely healthy. We are looked at as a very stable organization financially, and the surplus bears that out. How are you? Yeah, I'm sorry, was there a question? Oh, all right, I heard a door then. So real quick on your structure. So you have a coverage in different layers. And that first one from 0 to 250, that's, again, your SIR. That's insurance speak for self-insured retention. It basically means that's yours. Think of it as a deductible. It basically acts as that. Once you get to the 250,000, that's when we hit the WMIC layer, and that's when we would kick in. We take from 250,000, in your case, to currently 1.75 million. Then we enlist reinsurers, and we go out again and negotiate on your behalf to bring in reinsurers to provide another layer of protection. In this case, that takes you up to 10 million with a 40-60 quota split between two different entities, GEM and Genesis. So they share that layer. And then if everything goes really poorly, we have an extra 2 million on top of that in an excess layer. So you would have up to $12 million in liability coverage if everything went really awry. Thank you, Jackie, which we have never had to use, which we're very happy to stand up here and say. So, I told you this was going to be unbelievably exciting. That chart right there, if that doesn't blow you away, then I don't have much else for you. I do want to get to the good stuff, which is Jackie behind me talking about disallowances. Before I do that, let me just take a moment to share kind of what we're seeing in 2023. So again, please understand, I've been here less than half a year, but a lot has happened in that less than a half a year's time. And one of the things that we have recognized is that WMIC is not interested in status quo. There's things that we feel we need to do for our membership to remain competitive and to remain an industry leader. So going into 2023, we have a board meeting coming up in December where we're going to present a number of ideas. Those ideas, in summary, are going to center around, first of all, a premium and pricing stability initiative. We feel that we really need to bring the increases. Now, a lot of these increases have been out of our control. The markets, the reinsurance markets have been nuts. But we want to look at what it is that we can control and how do we bring premium stability to you and all of our members, not just next year, but multi-years going forward. So that's of great interest to us. Impactful programs, trainings, and services. We have done a very robust market analysis, and although I think we are extremely financially strong and good in providing what we do, there's an opportunity to give you additional services that will meet your needs. So we're really focusing in on not frivolous services, not things that we can just say that we have, but services that will really impact our members, you and our other members. Improving our partnerships, tremendous amount of turnover. We're member owned. If our relationships aren't intact, we are going to struggle. The WMIC story is an amazing story, but if everyone that knew the story is gone and nobody's there to tell it, it really doesn't matter. So there's a lot of engagement opportunities we're going to take advantage of to reinvest in those relationships in our members. Developing onboarding and engagement tools kind of goes along with that to keep our retention up. Exploring additional products. We also have a very creative, not only are they really good at what they do, they're very creative. And I know Jackie has come to me with several ideas on different coverages that we don't currently offer that would maybe really improve the protection that we can provide for our members. And then lastly, market analysis. A growth strategy, I think, is in our future. I don't think it's right around the corner. There's some things we want to take care of first. But because this is your membership, I feel compelled to tell you these kinds of things. Again, your company, not ours. Here's some of the things that we're planning to do. We're going to go through in December a list of projects that's over 40 projects long. And we're going to ask for help from our members in guiding us and prioritizing those projects. And they're going to take our massive team of 10 people, and we're going to go after it. And I do say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, because we're pretty lean and mean. I know you can appreciate that. That's how you operate. That's how we do it. But if we can prioritize the right projects, we think we can really make a difference for you and all of our members. So I appreciate the time. Is there any questions before I let Jackie talk about disallowance? All right. All yours. Thanks, Jackie.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. So I'm going to go ahead.
Kurt had a question.
I guess just a couple of questions. I noticed in the financials that the surplus equals 9.14 times net premium. Is that best practice standard?
That's a great question. So there's several different ways that actuaries will look at that. One of them is what they call an RBC, risk-based capital. And what they are looking for in the industry is for you to get to, if you're at 300%, the OCI is probably coming in and helping you run your operations. Basically meaning I'm out of a job and we're all gone. If you get to around 900%, they start feeling comfortable. You hit over 1,000, and that's when you're in their green zone. And the green zone means you are in a great shape from a surplus standpoint. Right now, we're at 1143 in our surplus ratio. So the RBC is not a direct premium to surplus. That is certainly one way to look at it. The RBC is a little bit deeper and goes further into some of your other financials.
And just to tag on that, the increase in reserves went up 2.8 million last year, and the dividends were up slightly from the year before. Was that intentional that the entity increased reserves by $2.8 million, which is almost 70% of premium, net premium?
Yeah. So again, multiple factors coming into play here. One of the things that was occurring before my time, it was AM Best was looking at WMIC and expecting them to do some things differently than what they had been. I think the surplus was a little low. There was even a year in 2017 where there was no dividend. Since that time, there has been more focus on building surplus, of course. Now, the actuaries will help us in setting those reserves, but it's kind of three legs of a stool, and you're trying to figure out reserves and premiums and dividends. So I don't know if, Jackie, you have a more direct answer, other than the only other thing that we're seeing is the social inflation in the reinsurance market has a lot of people running scared. So premiums are going up, but they're also expecting the reserves to go up to make sure you can cover it. So is there anything else that you think might be contributing?
I mean, obviously our litigation cost is going up. Every claim has again, that social inflation factor, and so the cost of...
Speak into the
Sorry.
mic. So
the cost of litigation is obviously driving that, so we're spending a little bit more money to try to defend these claims for you guys. But for the most part, the losses have remained kind of stable. We have a pretty consistent loss that we know we're going to expect every year. So it's really just kind of that driving piece that kind of sometimes fluctuates. And because we are so small, when we do have a major loss, it does fluctuate quite a bit.
The reserve.
Yeah, the reserves.
Which is why that surplus is so important, for us to have tucked away.
And I imagine part of that, and where that ends up this year may be significantly different depending on the investments.
Yeah, and as I'm sure you're aware, the investment that role hasn't been fantastic over the last year. Now, the only thing that's helping us, not the only thing, one of the main things that's really saving us, not to get too deep into it, we use statutory accounting. So that allows us to take that loss that we should have recognized, and we get to go with book value.
Yeah.
So that does help quite a bit in this scenario.
Go ahead. Well, no, you need to be,
Whenever you talk,
you need to be close to the,
otherwise the recording won't pick it up.
I just moved my hand over to Jackie. I don't want to stand behind her.
you're welcome to sit up here too.
Any other questions for Palin before? Okay. I'm going to talk about a little bit more about the coverages and the insurance and the claims process, if you will. So obviously, everything starts with a WMIC policy. You have a policy with us. At the sole discretion of WMIC, we do have the duty to investigate, defend, and appeal any and control all your claims. Even though you have a 250 SIR, we control that claim from $1. So we are assisting and working with Mary Jo on every claim to make sure it's being handled properly. So we do work closely with you guys to make sure those claims are being handled. So our guiding principles for dealing with claims and claims administration is to manage your claims from inception, which is $1, and we promptly pay what is owed. I think there's, my understanding is that from your guys' perspective, you don't see the claims that we're paying. You are only probably seeing the claims that we disallow. So you're probably have this perception that maybe we just disallow claims all the time, and that's not the case. We actually do settle and resolve claims without maybe you guys' knowledge, or we defend claims that maybe went to suit versus through a federal process versus or an EOC or ERD process that you guys aren't even seeing as well. So
ERC.
oh, those are your employment practices claims. So the ERD is part of the Department of Workforce Development. The EOC is your it is the Equal
Opportunity.
Yep. Commission. So, sorry. So you guys typically do not see those types of claims that we are handling. You are only probably seeing the ones that we do recommend for disallowances. The other thing we do is obviously we use governmental immunities, and everything is, we'll get to that in the next slide, but everything is based on a cap and a statute of how we handle these claims. And then even when we handle those claims and we do settle those claims, we do negotiate based on what is fair, what the law allows us to pay for, and what it doesn't allow us to pay for. So we are making sure we're using good source and rules to make sure that we are paying only what we owe and not anything more. Because as Palin said, we are a steward of public funds for the group, not just one. So we do keep that in mind when we do look at these claims. So the next page talks about 893.80. So everything is governed under this section here. So no claim can be brought unless it's filed per 893.80, and that means they have to file a claim within 120 days from an event, and that has to be a written notice to the county clerk or to the chairperson of the county board. It has to include specific things like their address and the itemized amount that they're seeking, an actual dollar value. It cannot be in excess of, it has to be a specific dollar value that they're seeking in order for it to be considered proper. Once we get those claims in, we do review any statutory things that would make this claim payable, or if this is claim that we would have to disallow, we do investigate all that stuff. That could include talking to the claimant, talking to our employees, talking to other parties involved, witnesses and the alike, to make sure we understand the full picture of what's going on with that claim. Once we do that, unfortunately, sometimes if the claim is one to disallow, we do recommend and send that notice to Mary Jo, and that does come before you guys to do. Once a claim comes in, we have 120 days to take action. So if we are not meeting those time frames to disallow, then it becomes statutorily disallowed, meaning we cannot shorten that statute to resolve, even if we owe a claim but we disallow because we can't agree, or we disallow because we really do want to shorten that statute of limitations down to the 6 months. There are reasons and a method to sometimes why we disallow on a claim that we may even think we might owe. And we do work those out with Mary Jo to make sure she understands that, why we're making those recommendations. And then after you guys take the action to disallow, that's not the end of the claim. They get sent a letter, but they still have 6 months if they dispute that to file an appeal or through a court action. They can file suit if they disagree with our decision making on that. So it's not the end. They still have a process to dispute those types of claims.
Are those appeals to the court?
Yes. They would have to file with a court action. So one of the reasons why I found this little tidbit, so one of the things that we do is look at immunity very closely. So everything, there's like only 3 things that bar immunity, and that's on the next page. That is your ministerial duties, which are statutes, so like rules of the road type statutes, case law, and your standard operating procedures. So we do get to look at that. And then when there's known danger, which typically a court usually has to decide that. That's not something that we would be able to decide because it's a pretty high bar to get there. And then actions that are malicious, willful, and intentional. And it has to be all 3. But the main thing is going to be your ministerial duties is what gets you out of immunity. Oh, was there questions? No? Okay. So immunity actually implies negligence is part of it. Like, so you could be negligent, but immunity does protect the county. And the reason why immunity was granted was to help municipalities perform services for the benefit of the public, for their discretionary actions, where it could be a significant burden, time, and cost for litigation if you didn't have it. So that's one of the reasons why immunity is in play for governments, unlike a private sector. Does anybody have any questions about that and what's about disallowances and the role of your guys' job with when we present or Mary Jo comes to the board with recommendations to disallow? I think you guys might have some on the board today.
I think Mary Jo's going to walk us through a couple of those.
Okay. Yep.
So if we have if the board takes action to disallow, does that end the process? I mean, obviously they can take court action, but short of taking court action, is there any provisions that we continue to negotiate with the individual to actually settle the claim short of them having to go to court?
Yeah, so sometimes like on those ones that we actually do think we might owe, but we're still in a disagreement about, maybe on damage amounts, we have to still continue to negotiate those claims outside of court action to try to, but that disallowance kind of forces their hand to try to get them to work with us.
Time frame to 6 months. Gotcha.
Yeah, so we still have, there's still that avenue as well. Any other questions?
Well, it's more of a comment.
Mary, if you could please use a microphone, because we are live on YouTube.
Is it on? Okay. Well, Jackie, can you explain? We have had claims that they were denied directly by WMIC versus going through the disallowance process. And there's a benefit and there's a barrier to that. So if you could explain the benefit and also the barrier to doing that.
Sure. So the benefit of denying a claim gives the claimant their actual full statute of limitations time frame, which could be 3 years or 6 years, depending on the type of claim it is. So the benefit, it does provide even more time to try to resolve that claim. The downside of that is really you have this claim out here that is kind of hanging out that could be for out there for 6 years, and we have to look at that sometimes financially. We can't close it out sometimes if it's kind of hanging out there, knowing that there's still a potential to resolve, and financials can impact us, which can also impact the county. So they're really, I do always usually see a better benefit of trying to shorten those time frames down to that 6 months, just so we can try to resolve. If there is something that we can't resolve, it's going to go to court action anyways. So shorting it down actually is probably, I think, better than leaving it hang out there.
And that 6 months still just means that they have to file within that 6 months. It doesn't mean that the court's going to have it settled within that 6 months.
Correct. It could go for years sometimes, and we've seen that with COVID. There was obviously lots of delays in courts. But two, sometimes when a claim goes on that long, both parties are willing to resolve as well. So
Again, that denial comes from you without our action by us, or is that denial by us?
that
So you did denial by WMIC, and I'm trying to understand what that means. So who is doing the denial that results in the extension of the time?
So there's a couple things. So if you guys do not take action, it becomes statutorily disallowed. And when it does that, if we don't take action in that first 120 days, and we know that that has not come to the board or you guys have not taken action, WMIC will go and just send a letter to the claimant letting them know that this happened. So they can then take action whenever they like. So that denial letter comes from us, but is still technically under law considered statutorily disallowed. That makes sense?
But then the time frame for them to file court action has been extended.
Yeah, it's the regular statute of limitations.
Okay.
It's not shortened.
So what is,
So the advantage, if I could paraphrase, the advantage for the board to deny shortens the time frame to guarantee statute 6 months to file a claim by the claimant. If they choose not to file a claim, then if they file later than that, it's too late?
Yep. So, and it's not file a claim; it's filing a court action because they've already filed the claim if it's coming to you in front of this board.
so then, just so I understand, so when we deny it, they've got a different time frame for initiating the claim, 6 months.
Yep.
When you deny it, it keeps that 3 to 6 years. So how many do you deny without our action relative to how many come to us?
Well, unfortunately, this year, there has been no claims that have been truly considered disallowed by your guys' board. So we've had to deny 2 claims where those statute of limitations have been those 3 to 6 years where this claim could be coming into play again. So now you guys don't get a lot of claims. You guys average about 20 a year, and a good chunk of those are probably settled. I think I have my numbers here. So we typically settle 2 times as many as we disallow. So
Additional question, John. What's the criteria that you use that a claim does not come to the board for denial versus you just denying it under the statutory provisions? In other words, who is making the decision to not bring it to the board for its look and denial versus, and then it just following the denial process in the statutes?
So unfortunately, sometimes we don't always have the investigation ready, and that could delay why maybe something doesn't come to you timely. It could also fall on us that we didn't get everything we need to investigate, where we don't have the information ready to perform like a disallowance. There's still key information that we're still waiting on before we take that action. So there could be something of that, but we only do the denial once that 120-day statute time frame is gone. So we do always work with Mary Jo to make those recommendations, usually timely. So it's just a matter of getting it on the board, having these committees ongoing. Missing a committee sometimes for various reasons could jam up that process.
So if we have 20 claims a year, you're denying twice as many, so 13 to 14.
So if we have 20 claims a year, we'd probably settle 10 of those,
Okay.
and we would probably deny 5 of those, and the other ones are probably like litigated or something that probably won't even come to you. Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
No, thank you guys.
You had us riveted. Mary Jo, do you want to then walk us through the items A, 1A and B? And Michael, you're here for support.
Okay, so discussion of claim allowance for item 1A, which is Progressive Subrogation, Artisan and Truckers Casualty Company, and discussion of item 6.1B, Terra Mac. This is actually the same claim. It's unusual, it doesn't happen this way too often, but this is actually the same claim. What had happened here in this scenario is Ms. Mack had filed a notice of claim against the county stating that a lawnmower threw a rock into her window or windshield of her vehicle on Stewart Avenue, claiming damages for her vehicle. The investigation took place. In the meantime, she had turned that claim into her personal auto insurance, which is Progressive Insurance, a subsidy of Artisan and Truckers Casualty Insurance Company, and then they in turn filed a subrogation claim against Marathon County for the amount that they paid out on behalf of Ms. Mack for her damages, as well as I believe they included her insurance deductible. So based on the scenario and the investigation, there was investigation done to see if it was a city mower or county mower or any other mower. And based on that, there was no solid documentation that it was any of the above or any equipment belonging to the county based on the facts presented in the claim. And therefore, the recommendation from WMIC was to disallow the claim. And if it were, we would have immunity as well based on the circumstances. So based on that, the recommendation from our insurance is to disallow this claim.
So I'm going to ask a question because we had a claim earlier where actually the person claimant contacted me, and but that was disallowed by WMIC versus us. So what is the difference and what are the criteria that trigger one going one way and one going another way?
I think if I know that claim, I think we missed the time frame to formally take action for her. So
Okay.
we could not disallow her claim at that point. It's considered statutorily disallowed.
So it was 120 days?
Yep. So we didn't take action within the 120 days, and so it was statutorily disallowed. And so that's what that prompted WMIC to send a denial to her. So there's some sort of communication going out to them to let them know what the status of their claim is. And again, since I have the floor, we have fantastic case law for mower claims that we have won in court. So this is not something that we take lightly. We have taken these smaller action claims to court and have won them. And so this court action here that I gave Mary Jo does, like I said, case law helps us with our immunity. So if we have good case law that says we don't have to pay something because of the what's the word I'm looking for? Because we have good case law to say that we don't owe something and that immunity does apply for these types of losses, we will utilize these on claims going forward. So you will see a lot of more claims that we do recommend to disallow.
So do we need to go through the details? So this, I think we have a recommendation to deny both the subrogation where the Progressive has paid and they are now seeking recovery, and the claim from Terra Mac relative to the same. Is that correct? The subrogation. So I'm assuming that they paid under their claim and now are coming back after us for reimbursement.
Correct.
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 Go ahead, Kurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the only question, obviously the question that has arisen is, was it a county mower or was it not a county mower? And I don't know why we would have had a county mower on Stewart Avenue, but it's possible. So, but I would make a motion to deny both the claim from the claimant individually and the insurance company claim, and move to the full board for consideration.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Limmer. Could have been Marathon Park.
Mr. Chair, could I just clarify, is that a motion to disallow the claim? Okay, thank you.
So do you want to restate the motion for the record?
The motion would be to disallow the claim for Marathon County for both the insurance company of Progressive and the claimant individually.
Is that the second's intent? All right, is there any discussion? This goes to the board then.
This does have to go to the full board for. Does it
Any
not?
discussion?
No, it does not.
Or no, it does not. It does not need to go to the full board. So this is a final action on it. So we're learning. This is why we have an educational component with a decision-making component. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of disallowance will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. And thank you. Thank you for the education. All right, we are going to jump to committee recommendations and updates on the strategic plan. I'm going to defer action on the work plan timeline because we're missing 2 members, and I had a request to try to get out of here at a timely manner. So. Well, it was the people in the security, they have guns, so. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Leahy as the vice chair and our strategic plan coordinator. Czar.
We settled on czar. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I didn't receive a ton of feedback from the community at large. I did get one addition. Is Yiling on virtually or not? Okay, so he did submit some language to me. I printed it out if everyone just wants to see it.
Do you want to read it? If it looks like it's short.
It is short. He suggested a strategy C, working with the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partners to ensure achievement and implementation of the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partners Economic Development Strategic Plan. The only issue is he didn't specify which objective number he was thinking the strategy C would go under. So it might be problematic that he's not on right now. I was thinking it was probably either 10.6 or 10.8. But I guess I'm not sure how we should proceed with him being absent.
Well, I think it's before us for discussion, but, we need a motion. We were looking at the various components of the plan. So, Chair Gibbs.
Yeah, the question I guess I would have is if we're going to be adopting as a strategy to take on the full plan of another entity, I really question whether or not that's appropriate without having 100% knowledge of what's in their plan. I would caution this committee before we'd approve something of that magnitude without understanding all of the full plan that they have. And we don't have any documentation to see what that plan is. So putting it as a goal and a strategy,
Members are free to bring in amendments when we deal with the strategic plan at either the executive committee or the board meeting. Cody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd agree with Chair Gibbs with that. If there's a specific language within their strategic plan that we could adopt specifically. Also, we don't without knowing what their strategic plan is, I mean, I guess their strategic plan could also change, which would mean our strategic plan could change. So I'd rather have something more concrete that we could agree with and submit. Thank you.
Was that tied in the United to Thrive initiative? Do you
I'm not
know?
certain. I guess the one thing that I will speak to positively about this proposed strategy is that, we do call out other entities within those two objectives that I mentioned, 10.6 and 10.8. We talk about McDevco, we talk about the North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board. There's probably room to to be aware of new groups, new organizations, new economic development entities that exist over the years, and maybe incorporate opportunities to work with those entities in a more concrete way. But I do agree that just kind of saying we're going to adopt someone else's strategic plan within our strategic plan seems kind of like a risk.
One of the differences, though, is that in both of the other cases, we have board members that are members of those governing entities, whether it's McDevco or the Workforce Development Board. So there's a difference. Not to say that the objectives of the plan aren't meritorious, but we just don't know what those objectives are. Go ahead.
If you prefer, that plan is available online, and just a little bit of context, the county board did it was either 2018 or 2019, it did allocate funding for the completion of that strategic planning event to the Greater Wausau Region Chamber of Commerce. I can send that a link to that plan. Like I indicated, it's available online. I'll do that before the end of this meeting, just so that the rest of the committee has seen it. And certainly, as your representative on the Greater Wausau Region Chamber of Commerce Board, I'm familiar, generally speaking, with the plan and the initiatives. But to your point, I certainly appreciate that conversation, and I'll forward it on to this full committee for its consideration.
Okay. And again, we're not shutting the door on it. I think there's a lot of confusion relative to what it means. So others, I know Supervisor Hart, you were working on ones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just sent the language to Clerk Trueblood. I was working with Molly, and I want to thank her for working with me on that strategic plan. 12.3 to create an outcome measure specifically to address turnover within the county employees. Kind of going back and forth and discussing what's realistic for our current job market. I think what we decided upon was, and like I said, I sent it over in an email, so you'll have that language for the minutes, but the outcome measure would be reduce to and maintain a county employee resignation turnover rate of 15% or lower by December 31st, 2024. And that pretty much means anybody who decides to end their employment with Marathon County, right away. It takes out retirements, which, we can't really control, people aging and deciding that they want to retire. And then the 15% was meant to be a little bit more realistic with the current job market, because industry standard would be 10% turnover rate, but with where things are heading, and it's a employee market right now, 15% was more realistic. And this does also set the goal to put at 15 or lower, which means we could still do the 10%. But 15, I think, is a good measure for right now. And then I also wanted to be clear about my intention for this. It was kind of to give a goal for department heads in order to, do things outside of human resources power to keep people, essentially. One of the examples that I'll use is social services. I know the director, Vicky, works very hard in order to create a culture there, and that department has very low turnover rate, and they deal with really difficult stuff. Secondhand trauma is something that she addresses with her employees a lot. And that, like I said, that's attributed to lower turnover in that department. I know that that doesn't translate to every other department as well, but I think, putting the onus not just on human resources, but also all the departments to reduce turnover as much as possible is a worthy goal.
So is that, it's non-seasonal employees, just so we understand that?
Yes. Yes.
Is that a motion?
That is motion.
Is there a
to include
second?
into the strategic plan.
Is there a second by Supervisor Leahy? Any discussion? Chair Gibbs.
Just a clarification, Supervisor Hart, that would be for an annual percentage of turnover rate?
An annualized, yeah.
Thank you.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the proposed strategy for the strategic plan will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Anything else? And I know that we were going to deal with Supervisor Lemmer's concerns relative to the energy policy, and that is a task force, and that's being worked on. Anything else? If not, those will go to the, I think we meet before the executive committee meeting. So if for some reason Supervisor Zhang clarifies that, there's a chance we could revisit that at our next meeting in order to get it to the executive committee in time. So I will try to reach out or work with Supervisor Leahy and reach out to him to seek clarification on that. In terms of the committee work plan timeline, my intent was to begin to talk about that, but I know that there has been some discussion. Chair Gibbs and Administrator Leonard approached me about potentially creating a task force for tax increment financing. That way we can take advantage of community members with some expertise beyond us. So we will be working on framing that task force recommendation, bring it to you, and then take it to the executive committee, and then ultimately the board, and then the chair would make the appointments to that task force. And I wanted to begin the discussion of what sort of time frame we were looking at for some of the others deliverables, but we're missing 2 members. I'd like to have them here. ARPA update on process for reviewing round 2 request.
I can give you a high level overview of your kind of where you are with respect to your American Rescue Plan Act process. You recently concluded what we've termed your round 2 application process. And in terms of applications, you received 10 initial applications. I was recently contacted by one of the applicants indicating that that they were interested in withdrawing their application. I need to confirm that as I got a phone call from that entity yet today. But in terms of overall dollar value for that second round, in terms of submissions, it's approximately $5.3 million was requested across the body of those. Your review process initially envisioned this body reviewing those applications during the month of November and into December. In working with the chair, I can reach out to those entities. If your process continues to be consistent in that, you'd be inviting those individuals and entities in to make a brief presentation to the body and then answer any questions. But I have received, as I indicated, 10 total applications. I believe 9 are going to move forward, but I'll confirm that later this week. And I do have supporting documentation from each of those entities. Interestingly, you also have, now that you're into round 3, you have received a round 3 application as well.
And some interest, other interest. So the question for us today is, do we want to take them all up on December 7th? Our second meeting in December would be the 27th, which is right after Christmas. I don't think that many people are going to be in the festive frame of mind that they want to come in and deal with ARPA requests at that time. So we have an option of, if you wanted a second meeting, moving the meeting up to the 20th or slog through it on the 7th. And I know some people have concerns when we start getting beyond 4:35 in terms of time frame. But the option, we can try to minimize the other work of the committee. Do you want to do it with them all at once, or as we did with round one, do it in 2 tiers? And if you want to do it 2 tiers, would you be open to meeting on the 20th? Any thoughts? Chair Gibbs.
Even if you have nine submissions and 10 minutes apiece, you're talking 90 minutes. So, I mean, what about the option of having an additional meeting dedicated only to ARPA?
That's the third option. So we could do that. We could do that the week of the 12th if you wanted to. What are your thoughts on that? We would have we could do it on the day of the county board meeting. It would be a long day. We could do it on the 14th.
So are you saying we would have 3 meetings, or we would still just have 2, and one of them would be ARPA only?
My intent is to cancel the December 27th meeting.
Okay, that is my birthday, so I would really appreciate that for personal reasons.
Well, on
but-
second thought, I think we should get together for cake.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts? You have a preference, Cody?
And just so we're clear, we would be still having the meeting on the 7th. The second meeting would be on the 13th, just for ARPA, and then we'd cancel the 27th meeting.
Right.
Okay, that sounds great to me.
So does the 13th work? Kim, how does that work for you? Because all we have is ARPA, we should be done by 4:30, I would think. So do we want to go with the 13th? If you could change that on the calendar, and we will not meet on the 27th. Should we need, there won't be a county board meeting, so there won't be any reason for us to meet later in the month. We'll catch things in early January.
And will that be 4 o'clock 3 o'clock still on the 13th?
3 o'clock with the hope we'd be done by 4:30, no later than 4:30. All right, we'll make that change. I wanted to have a discussion. I'll plant the seed, and we'll carry this item over as well. While it was fresh in your minds, I'd like to have a discussion about what your impression was of the budget process, what we could have done better, what your informational needs were that we didn't meet, what information would have been more helpful. I think that Administrator Leonard has made a commitment to looking at the timing of that to engage the county board earlier, but I think it would be helpful for this committee, and again, we're missing 2 of our members. I'd like to have them present for their input, so we will carry that over to the next meeting to try to steer the debate in the discussion, or give some guidance to the administrator as to how we can do it. I know that some people have questions about what fund balances are, so I think there's a need for us to look at what they are, what they mean, how they relate to each other and to the budget. So I think we're working on some educational programs for this committee and the board, but also was information timely? Was the information complete? How did the budget amendment process work? Any thoughts that you may have, so we'll talk about that going forward. All right. County budget to actual is in the packet. Is Christie on? Christie, do you want to just highlight she hopped off. In your packet are the August, September, October financials prepared by Christie. I don't know if there's a need to bring her back in. Their information, we will look forward to having this information on a regular basis, and hopefully much better with a new system come next year. So that information's there, and I know Christie wanted to make sure that you knew that it was in the packet. Supervisor Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question. Our Workday is starting at the beginning of the year, January. Are we on track for that?
Correct. As of right now, our go live is planned for the end of the calendar year. I will clarify, and I can get you additional information if you're looking for it, but that, it really is a phased go live. I mean, the most essential piece of Workday for our organization, and this will not be a surprise, I don't think, to anyone, is that we have payroll working appropriately at that time, because we can implement a lot of things. You know, you can put the learning management module in place later within 2023, and that's kind of our intent. But the thing that absolutely needs to be working before the end of the year, before we go live, is that payroll module. So it will be a phased go live. It's not like a switch is going to be flipped and we're now not utilizing other systems that we have in place, but it's going to be staggered throughout certainly the first half of the year.
So some information will be available immediately, but others will be as it rolls out.
And I just asked that because I know that with Workday being implemented, we'll have better reports that have been asked by the larger county board. So that'll be nice to have in place. And I just wanted to make sure that we were in track. I know one of this monthly actual to budget, I know that's one of the things that had been asked. And then, you know, Kayenta is old, so it wasn't really working well. But yeah, that's just why I asked. Thank you.
It may be worthwhile, and I'll just throw this up for discussion for us to, in January at the educational program, just talk about what's happening, where it is, what you should expect and when. You know, and you had Molly and Christy give an update to the board, but that was at concept stage, and now we're going to be implementing. So it may be worthwhile to just roll that out for the board, because there are lots of people that on January 2nd are going to want reports that aren't going to be there.
Sure, I can speak with the implementation team and have something available in terms of education on at that January meeting.
I think critical to that, you're very correct, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things that is, is expected, but I think it's maybe not a very well thought out expectation, is that we're going to have, a comparison budget to actual and comparison year to date to prior year to date. And we're probably not going to have a prior year to date information because, again, it's going to be in two different systems. One is still going to be in Kayenta, and it may not have moved. 2022's data will not have moved to Workday to be able to give us prior year comparisons.
But I think those are the expectations we need to manage.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Exactly.
And it's not a worthwhile use of staff time to create that opportunity, because they need to get the system up and functional. So, thank you. All right. Committee members are asked to bring ideas. Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A little pressure here. Kind of. I have just some curiosities about our agreement with the UWSP. And I guess maybe some education would be good on that, and then a clarification or a redefinition of our relationship with them would be fantastic.
From a property management perspective.
Right.
So we'll try to schedule it in at a future meeting. I know it's part of the administrator's work plan as well. Is it not? Parts of it?
It is on the work plan. I'm happy to put that on a future agenda item, because I think there's a great opportunity for the board as the policymaker to drive that conversation as opposed to me as a staff person. Absolutely, we can bring that.
We talked about it before the meeting, so we will make sure that we schedule it. Thank you. Anything else? If not, what are your wishes relative to item 9?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn, but prior to that, I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and thank everyone for their dedication to Marathon County's taxpayers.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Second by Leahy. All those in favor of adjournment will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries, and I too wished you a happy Thanksgiving and safe.